Hey friends, I'm Will and welcome back to the studio. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make your very own completely personalized bespoke shoulder strap. I'm going to be using Nova Nappa, which is a absolutely beautiful dark semi-dark brown, retanned, so vegetable chrome tan, and then retanned into vegetable. It's a phenomenal leather called Nova Nappa. It's got a bunch of other names. It's called Barenia, Baronil, I think is another name for it. But it's stunning. You're going to be seeing how I use that in a moment. I'm going to be using a clicker die to cut out the pattern. If you want more details, don't forget to send me an email. My details are down below and I can sort out the pattern for you if you would like some more information about that. And I'm going to be using a 4 centimeter wide cotton canvas strap. Now, you can use any strap you want. Now, and the fantastic thing about this particular pattern, this particular method of making a strap, is that it is completely personal. You can take the same tab, if you like, and you can apply it to any length, any width, any style of strap you want to apply it to. And that's the wonderful thing about this. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it. So let's get started right now. Okay, so like I said in the intro, I'm going to be using a Nova Nappa leather for this. It's the same as Barenia, if you've heard of that. It's very famous, made by Hermes, well, used by Hermes. This one I believe is 0.16 to 0.18, depending on where on the hide it is. And I'm using a bonded leather that's 0.8 millimeters. I'm using the bonded leather just because it gives it some extra non-stretchness. Because leather by itself will stretch, especially when it's used to carry something. So over time, that leather will stretch, if not immediately. So I'm going to be gluing it using a water-based adhesive to the bonded leather. So I'm going to be covering that completely. The really important thing for this, when you're bonding two pieces together, is to make sure that you really saturate both the leather and the bonded leather. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of glue on the surface of the leather. That's okay. I'm using a pattern cutter, a clicker press die, that I can just about get around that, so I don't really mind. But you do need to be careful when you're gluing leather together. You don't get any leather glue on the surface of your skin, for obvious reasons. Now, it's important to sort out the edges and crease it before you go any further, because once you've put it all together and stitched it, there's absolutely no way of getting to the edge itself. So after I've creased it, and Nova Nappa creases so beautifully, I'm also going to mark out the pricking line just to give me a reference for later. And I'm going to be painting the edges just because you can't really burnish a bonded leather. To be fair, I've never tried, but with Nova Nappa I do like to paint the edges black. I think it looks really, really nice with the Nova Nappa finish. So you'll also see here that I'm painting the back of it, so the bonded leather itself. And the reason for that is because this is where the dog clip will go. This is where the actual metal hardware will go. And if you look into that gap once it's all put together, you don't want to be able to see the brown of the bonded leather. You want it to be all the same black of the edges. You want it to look really nice and crisp and clean. So make sure you paint the back of it where the turn of the clip itself is. So after you've painted the edges, sorry about the lighting, I forgot to turn my yellow light off. I like to work in yellow light at night. You want to prick mark your holes or punch your stitching holes. Now I do 17 holes on each side, if that's of any interest to you. And that's just because of the size of my particular pattern, because and you can see here mine's 20 millimeters wide. So what you want to do is mark 10 millimeters on each side, which is obviously half of the width of your pattern. And however far up you want to cut your, I think they're called kites, or no, darts, that's the one, dart. And the reason we're putting glue on here is a special little trick that I came up with. I've not seen it anywhere else, and it's because when you cut this, and on the edges as well, when you cut it, this glue will stop, or mostly stop, the edges from fraying. So it's really, it's a fantastic hack when you're making these, just to put some glue there before you cut it. And then when you have cut it, you won't get any frayed edges, making your life so much easier. Because if you've done this, if you do this cut without it, if you cut this dart out without the glue there, you have a really big challenge of trying to stick together frayed edges. So I've cut out that dart, and like I said, it's 3.5 centimeters up the length and 1 centimeter in, so half the width of the pattern in. So when I close that dart, it will have a really nice shape underneath the tab. So the glue I'm putting here is actually for 2 reasons. One, again, to stop it from fraying, really useful. But it will also mean that I can use this glue to attach it together. So normally what you'd do is, without this, you would put it together and then you'd try to either tape it or staple it. But I've found that if you use this glue method, 1, you get no fraying, and 2, if you let it soak in and dry completely, it will hold. Now this is a cotton webbing. I can't remember where I bought it from, but it's more of a universal tutorial, because you can do this technique with any webbing, or even a leather strap that you're making. If you don't want to cut the leather into this shape, you can cut it straight and then make this dart itself. It's a really useful way to turn pretty much any strap into any strip of leather or fabric or material into a shoulder strap. Now this is black non-stretch tape. This tape will literally never stretch, it's incapable, and the only reason I'm using it is just to hold that edge together slightly more while I stitch it. It won't prevent it from coming open completely, and the other thing is it will do a slightly better job of hiding that crease down the middle. If you don't do this, you have a very small chance of seeing that join down the middle of your tab, because there's obviously a change in the surface of the fabric. So before I glue it, I always do a dry run. So I've put the dog clip on. I think they're called dog clips anyway. They're called dog clips in the UK. You put the dog clip on, you line it up really nicely so it's centered, so it's exactly where you want it to be before you glue it together, in case there's any mistakes at this stage. After I've done a dry run, obviously, cover all of that tape in glue and a couple of millimeters either side. Now don't do too much, because if you do too much, you will see it either side of the tab, and that will be a nightmare. You basically want the glue the width of the end there all the way down, because that end is the width of the tab. Now yours may vary depending on your pattern. Now if you want this pattern for this particular tab, chuck me an email, my details are down below and I can sort you out. But it's not a particularly complicated pattern. It's a strip with some nice ends cut in it, And the great thing about that is you can make it any design you want. So now the glue's dried, we're going to put it back on together. We're going to put it together, and we're going to take a lot of time when we do this, because if you try and pull this off, because it's a fabric, you will fray it. That glue will just pull out of the material, and it will pull the tape off, and your results may vary, but you may completely wreck your project. So take your time, line it up properly, and then once it's lined up, put a lot of pressure into it so it fully, you can see me realigning it slightly there, because I wasn't entirely happy with how it was sitting up against the dog clip. And now I am. Fold it down, and then a lot of pressure. Make sure it's lined up evenly on both sides, because we've punched holes on both sides. We're not using a awl to punch the holes. We've pre-prick marked both sides of this tab. And you may be wondering, oh, why is there a prick mark all the way up until the dog clip? Because I actually like it to be, the stitch to be quite close. I think it gives it more protection and more support. If you want yours to be slightly further away, please feel free to do that. When you're doing this, make sure, absolutely make sure, that you do an overstitch, because it keeps that fabric together at the dog clip itself. Now, one thing you will see in a moment, but it's really important for me to mention now, is when you're pulling these out, when you're pulling the thread through, instead of pulling your left arm up and your right arm down, like you would normally if you haven't prick marked the back, you want to pull the threads essentially out completely straight, just like that. Because if you pull them out at an angle, you'll get a flat stitch, because you prick marked both sides. You've essentially got opposite angles of degree, or degrees of angle, or whatever you want to call it. So this is just to demonstrate, you want your overstitch to be on the fabric and not in front of it, because it will help keep that together as your strap ages. And we're all done. Don't forget to tap the threads down as you do with everything that you make, because you want to close those holes as much as possible. And there we go. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Do all the YouTubey things. And I hope you found this as useful as I found it enjoyable to make. I'll see you next time. Have a fantastic weekend. Take care.